So here's a question for you. Is narcissism a fad? I wish. I sincerely wish it was a fad. I wish this was a passing moment in time where narcissism was just bell bottoms and that all the people out there with low empathy and pathological selfishness and arrogance and entitlement and manipulation and who emotionally abuse, I wish it was all just a big misunderstanding, a fad. And we were wrong all along. And these are just folks who are having a bad day. And yeah, actually, everyone has a happy marriage and everyone has happy relationships and everyone did have happy childhoods and great bosses. And that by next year, we won't be talking about this narcissism stuff anymore. It's a fad. We'll put those bell bottoms away, right? I fucking wish. I wish this was a fad. Someone who should have known better, who actually educates people in the field of psychology, said this to me, said this to my face recently, that narcissism is a fad. And this was someone very senior in the field. And if I was good girl RAMANI, which for whatever reason, she was taking a break that day, I wouldn't have taken the fight, but I did. You see, that fawn response can fade with time. My fawn response pulled back this time. That fight response I have, or any of us have, not such a bad thing. So I took the fight. But I think part of the reason I could do it, I was taking not the fight for me, but for the thousands of people I'm observing directly suffering as a result of what these personalities and patterns do to people. It's terrible. But I have to say, at the end of sharing my point of view with this person, I did kind of feel sick. Can only do so much. I felt sick though. Not because I took the fight. I'll always be glad I did. But because I know this person is not the only person in the field who feels this way. This person was a big opinion leader and whose thinking influences many other people's thinking, especially people who go on to treat other people. And those people who are supposed to be helping people are now being told that narcissism is a fad. And from there it deteriorates into telling people in narcissistic relationships to take responsibility for their part of it, to own their part of it, to look inward and see what part of them is the problem, to blame them for disengaging from a narcissistic relationship that they cannot entirely leave because of fears of post-separation abuse, because of family court, because of financial interdependency, because of culture, because of lack of support. And that by disengaging and talking less or holding back on sharing yourself in a relationship where it's not safe to share yourself, that you are the bad one for not being fully open, despite having been treated badly every time you were open, and that you're the cold one for being distant. Ultimately, these people, all people, who are in, all of us, who have been in or are in narcissistic relationships, who took the brave step of learning about narcissistic relationships. For example, people like you who are watching this video, who are reading the books, who are watching all the other videos and are learning that, wait a minute, this behavior, it's a pattern, it's a thing. I am not misreading this. And not only is it a thing, it's not healthy and it's taking a toll on me. And that nothing I can do can change it, and it probably won't ever change. And from that jumping off point, many people have learned to interact with the narcissistic people in their lives differently and aren't just getting their hearts broken on a daily basis. But according to this fad person, if you did that, if you learned how to interact differently, especially, for example, in a long-term committed relationship, well, then you're the person who's the problem because you aren't listening to your partner. You're not being attuned to them. You aren't attending to them. And that means that this person's point of view would go on to inform therapists who are treating the person in the narcissistic relationship as though they're the problem. And to that I say again, and you know I don't usually curse on these videos, but I'm so pissed off. Fuck that. Then, in this sort of professional debate, the opinion leader told the audience, a narcissistic person, they're misunderstood. They're just someone who wants to do good and be the best. That's the point at which I was like, whew. And that she just wants to be good and do good, so she must be narcissistic. And then she went on to say that, in fact, everyone in that room wanted to do good and be good, so they're all narcissistic too. By that time, folks, my sympathetic nervous system said, bitch, fawn response, take the day off, fight, get up here and drive the damned car. That's what took me to really take this on. Because no, being narcissistic is not about wanting to be good or great. Being narcissistic is about a person delusionally believing they are good or great to balance out this deep insecurity and shame within. It's about saying they're good or great with no self-reflection or self-awareness that, in fact, that they're just a regular person like most of us. It's not about them wanting to be good or great. It's also about other people having to be less than them. It is about shutting down other people's voices and violating their rights and bulldozing them and not even regarding them as separate human beings with separate feelings, because that would be too much of a threat to their greatness. It's about stealing other people's realities and telling people that they're broken so that the narcissistic person can have the power and control. It is about a selfishness so deep that the narcissistic person would put their own well-being and superficial needs always ahead of those of a person that they claim to love. That's what narcissism is. And I can tell you that that's not me, and that's not many of the people I care about. That's why I became so angry. I'm like, don't you tell me that, nor should you tell that to the other people in the room. And it was not most of the people in that room to whom this person was referring. I'm going to be honest with you, my anger wasn't about the intellectual flaws in this person's argument. There were plenty of them. That's superficial nonsense to me. It's about people who are in power and have a lot of muscle in fields that involve educating and teaching people, including people like therapists, who don't understand narcissism. And then that ends up with the people who are going in for help being shamed. These are people who are going through something that we have never clearly articulated for decades in this field. I actually don't think we ever understood or articulated it in this field. And only now are we beginning to talk about it. And yet many people who go to therapy are still being shamed because what many people are being taught is that narcissism is a fad and everyone is narcissistic because they want to be good and great. Listen, almost no graduate students in counseling or psychology or social work learn about narcissistic relationships. It's something that if they're lucky, that they'll learn after they finish school, and that usually only happens if those of us who are therapists actually seek it out. It was interesting. After I left the argument, and I was upset, I talked with survivors who told me their stories, which were painful. They went through invalidating experiences and these unendingly painful experiences. These are people who tried everything in their relationships, who blamed themselves for years, who were shamed by friends and families and even therapists or other professionals in some cases for being too reactive, for being too angry, for being too demanding, for being too unrealistic. And then when these poor folks with no other options disengaged and stopped being reactive, then they were told that they were being too cold, that they were being a victim, that they weren't trying. Are you fucking kidding me? It's a catch-22. It's a double bind. It's a can't win. And this, after years, decades, or lifetimes of feeling that they cannot win in these relationships, and in good faith, going into therapy or couples therapy to try and figure it out, and then being told that they were the problem. All of that feels like a massive gaslight. Many of them were also told, well, this narcissistic person has been through difficult things. This yelling and invalidating, this is how their nervous system responds. They're just insecure, etc., etc. So in essence, many people in these relationships are basically taught how to be trauma therapists for their partners or family members and to shut down their own needs. That's not your role, and it is an impossible ask. Yeah, you can have empathy for a person who is behaving badly in a relationship. You can have empathy for them if they're making a good faith attempt to improve. If you are seeing some shifts in their behavior, even if they're just small shifts, and that when they do make mistakes, now they apologize, that's a different story. But being taught to make excuses for a person's narcissistic behavior that never changes, that's just a masterclass in enabling. I was angry as I reflected on people I know that I've talked with who spent years and years and years believing that a narcissistic partner would finally take care of them later in life. After all those years, they go through that just to have their care neglected, or to be isolated from family or friends who could help, or to be financially taken advantage of. I reflected on people who would give up on themselves after being told that they were nothing for so long. I reflected on people who from the day they were born were treated as an inconvenience and a disappointment by a narcissistic parent, especially if they didn't bring that parent exactly the supply and the version of them that the parent wanted. I reflected on people who live in guilt every damn day of their lives because they still think there was something they could do to make the relationship work. And I reflected on people, often older people I've talked with, I've worked with people who are over 60, over 70, over 80, who with tears in their eyes told me that they stayed in the marriage decades longer because a couples therapist told them they needed to work on communication, to voice their needs better, to understand their partner, who told them they were not communicating clearly, that they weren't expressing enough gratitude to their partner, that it takes two to damn tango, and not once considered a framework of narcissism or antagonism or manipulation when it was right there in front of them, or considered structural pressures like culture or finances or stigma or custody issues or fear that kept people stuck. These older clients or folks in longer relationships said that if this stuff you and other people are sharing about narcissistic relationships now was shared back in the 1970s or 1980s or even 1990s, I would have left sooner and might have had the chance to have had children or have had more of my life, or I didn't feel like I was a terrible, cold, mean, reactive, incapable of having a relationship person. Having to face up to someone who does work in this field, calling narcissism a fad, or asserting that everyone who wants to do good or be good is narcissistic, or that that's all that narcissistic people want to do, it didn't just incense me. Ultimately, it demoralized me. It's like being on a hike where you think the top of the mountain is around the next turn, but then you look at the map and you recognize that you're actually many miles away. Fixing all of this structurally, that's the work for me and my colleagues. But I guess to you watching this video, and you can see it's heated for me, but to you, I suppose I just want to remind you that despite the pushback and the distorted beliefs out there, with people who should know better, and people who don't know better saying that, this narcissism thing, it's a passing fancy, it's a soundbite, it's a hashtag, it's not real. This is really a you thing. That's not true. Narcissism's real, and it can shape us developmentally through the behavior of parents. It can shape us intimately through the behavior of partners. It can shape us professionally through the behavior of colleagues and bosses. And it can shape us societally through world leaders and political systems. The obsession with wanting to maintain whatever traditional status quo, people not wanting to challenge social constructs like marriage, family, hierarchies, means that millions of people are being thrown under the bus. Listen, I wish every day everyone was from a happy, healthy, safe family with loving, safe parents and get into happy, long-term committed relationships and are always psychologically safe and protected from trauma and worked in safe, collaborative workplaces with empathic, selfless leaders. We don't live in that world. But pretending that narcissism isn't a thing or that it's a fad so we can maintain the fantasy that everyone could have this, That's just straight up bullshit. I wish we lived in a world where relationships were 50-50 and it takes two to tango. And if you could just communicate clearly and keep your heart open and your empathy wide, that the other person will follow. It doesn't work that way in narcissistic relationships. These relationships are and always will be one-sided and soul-sapping. I wish narcissism was a fad. It's not. Sadly, understanding it is it's an awakening. It's a recognition that personality styles that for too long we just wrote off as difficult, or that's just how he is, or they don't really mean it, or relationships aren't always easy, or she just wants what's best for you, or don't take them so seriously, or they're just a perfectionist. That's not a fad. It's a recognition and a reckoning that these patterns are not good for us and never will be, and that it's okay to recognize that, and it's okay to disengage. You can't fix another person. That's their own personal responsibility. And of course, and above all else, that it's not you. Thanks again.